Texas has grown tremendously, as you pointed out. Roughly 31 million people now. We're developing into every corner of the state here. Have you all grown though, as the premier firefighting service that's supposed to watch over this and make sure that it doesn't all go up in flames?
Yeah, we've been around since 1950, so we've been around 110 years as an agency. We were primarily an East Texas agency in the origins of our agency, and it wasn't until the mid-90s that we began to go out to Central and West Texas and build out. And the legislature has continued to invest in us over time to grow the agency, to be able to respond to the more problematic wildfires we're seeing today. And so we've had some great investments by the lawmakers in Austin, and we'll look forward to some continued investments. We've got a couple requests in this session that are being explored. One of those requests is for aviation resources. An interesting note on aviation, can be a game changer. It's an awesome tool to have.
I think we've been seeing that in California.
Absolutely seeing it in California. We see here in Texas every year we'll have aircraft come in, drop water, drop retardant. Huge asset to have on the wildland fire scene. But we don't actually own any fixed wing aviation aircraft in Texas. We have a little bit of a complicated process to access those through our federal partners. So the United States Forest Service, the Bureau of Land Management, they maintain a fleet of fire suppression aircraft or contracts with fire suppression aircraft, and we can utilize those through our partners, through our federal partners, if they're not using them. And so that system's worked to some extent in the past, but now the competition's really, really high for those assets, and we see it in California now, where California's got a lot of those. If Texas needed them, we may or may not be able to access those through the federal system. So one of our asks is for Austin to consider, what does it look like for Texas to own or at least directly contract with fire suppression and fire supervision aircraft, so that we continue to have that tool in the toolbox, and we're never without, because we couldn't access them.
That's an interesting point, and I honed right in when you said if they are available, if they are accessible. We're seeing so many of these states though that are having these unprecedented fire risks, just like here in Texas. And on any given fire, you may or may not be able to get those aircraft. And I think we saw pretty starkly in California, we're seeing in real time how important that is, because there were days when they couldn't fly those helicopters or airplanes because the wind was just howling, 100-mile-an-hour winds. You're not putting up the choppers in that. But boy, when they were able to get those in the air, a couple of days later, bam, suddenly you're able to start actually knocking this fire down. I mean, you see what a difference it makes.
Absolutely. Yeah, and aircraft have limitations, as you just highlighted. When the winds are high, they can't fly, can't safely fly, can't effectively drop retardant. Retardant comes out of the belly of the plane and it shifts off site because the wind blows it. So there are limitations. But when they can be employed, they are a game changer and extremely beneficial. You mentioned earlier about me being out on the fire line for the good chunk of my career, and the absolute worst thing you want to hear as an instant commander on the fire line is that an aviation asset was UTF'd, unable to fill. Radio dispatch will radio in and say, aircraft UTF'd. You're not getting an airplane on your fire, and
deflate.
That's definitely a letdown, and that's just because there's only a limited supply of those aircraft, and when you're competing nationally for them, it's tough. It's tough sometimes to get them.
Are drones in that too, or is that a thought?
Yeah, drones are definitely developing. So currently there's no drone that has the payload capacity to drop water retardant, but they're in development right now. So that could be a thing in the future for sure.
How long do you think it is before we see something like that, roughly?
I know they're testing it now, and you've got different manufacturers playing around with how can they increase capacity, how can they safely work over a fire scene. So hopefully in the next 5, 6, 7 years,
so it's
we'll
changing.
start to see those absolutely changing fast.
Yeah, I was wondering about that during the California fires when they couldn't put pilots up and so forth. I was wondering, how long before we see drones going up and attempting, in some of those dicier situations?